Recording has started.
Hi, Brant.
Are you moving to DC or are you staying in Chicago?
So I'll be at the library in residence for a year and then back again.
I see. Okay. Just checking.
Hi, Robert.
Eugene is unable to handle my camera without cutting me in two, which he enjoys doing, but I can't fix it.
What'd you do to the camera, Robert?
I don't know why it hates me. I hate blue jeans. I think that's the problem. I fixed it. Hi, Brand. Hi, Amanda.
Hello.
Steve here. The camera is incapable of handling blue jeans without cutting Robert in two. I think that's. Sorry, I didn't parse that right.
It likes to cut me in two, but if I tell it not to and tell it to do it again, it stops. I don't know quite why.
Yes.
It's not software. Oh, but it is. But I don't have source code.
I see Chuck wasn't eaten by a bear. That's a good thing.
Was that a danger of happening? Oh, is he in Aspen?
Yeah. Apparently there were some bear sightings.
Yeah, I saw Beth's post about it.
Had one of people seem to be dropping out.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Shelko.
Hello.
You are being recorded. I see Amanda is here. Great. We'll start with Amanda. Mario might be late a few minutes, but he promised to be back by 1:30.
Hello, this is Pat Asmer calling in.
Hi, Pat.
Hi, everybody. I can see quite a few, 9 people, I guess. So.
Recording is on.
Maybe we'll give it another minute or two and let people sign on. Amanda, are you ready to go when you're ready to go?
Yep. As soon as you give me the green light, I'll share my screen and then I'll go.
Okay.
Hi, Ashish just joined, and for whatever reason, I have to join in with phone, though I'm connected on my computer. My video and mic is off, my audio on computer is on, whatever.
We can hear you.
All right.
Great.
Hello.
Is that Fed?
Yep.
Hi, Fed.
Where are you?
Here is New York. I'm in Madison Square.
Oh.
Actually, it appears I don't know where I am. I am in Union Square.
This does give you a bit of a Brady Bunch feel, doesn't it? Everybody's all laid out like this.
Hollywood Squares. I'm going to have to leave in about 45 minutes, by the way, Željko. Sorry, I have to leave 15 minutes early.
Okay, I would say that since we have the two presentations, we should probably get going.
All right.
All right, thanks everybody. You've seen the agenda from Željko yesterday and myself today. Our first talk is from Amanda Bauer. Amanda, I will let you take it away.
Okay, I will go ahead and share my screen. You all should have received the slides yesterday.
It may be prudent for others to go on mute.
Mm-hmm.
Let's make it required for everybody but Amanda to be muted.
Excellent. Then I get to decide no questions until the end. And I can see them if you chat. Okay, can everybody see the screen?
Not yet.
No, can't see it yet.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Let's try that again. That looks like it's working better.
Yeah, that's coming up.
Okay.
Okay.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to speak to you. I am the head of LSST Education and Public Outreach, and I started, I guess, in April. So a few months of exciting activity, and so we have a design together, and I'm ready to share that with you today. So I'll go through kind of the general design, happy to take questions at the end, and a lot of these aspects I'll be discussing at the all-hands meeting, so there'll be a lot more time for discussion then, and of course you can email me or we can discuss anything that you would like. So the purpose of the EPO program is really to provide non-specialists access to LSST data through digital tools and interfaces that are easy to use and that engage diverse communities with authentic research experiences. And I think you'll hear a little bit of familiarity that sounds very similar to what the overall LSST project goal is, and except for the, actually building the telescope part. So I think that is true because we do really see LSST data, this survey product, and giving non-specialists access to it as is the strength of what we can offer. So the main audiences for our program are the general public, which of course encompasses lots of different types of audiences, but that's what we're going to call it. Formal educators, citizen scientists, and content developers at informal science education facilities. So that includes planetariums and museums. And I'll quickly go through the key responsibilities of what EPO is. So to provide non-specialists access to the data, to facilitate citizen science projects that use LSST data, to further STEM education and training by engaging with educators in particularly so that they can have tools and resources to bring to their classes. We will build partnerships with institutions and organizations that serve underrepresented groups and will proactively engage with diverse audiences. I think that's really a strong goal of LSST and certainly for the EPO program as well. We will be engaging with the Chilean community through Spanish language components of the EPO program. Wherever available, we'll be providing everything in Spanish. And then a key aspect of EPO is to remain agile and relevant throughout the full lifetime of operations by making sure that we have a strong base architecture system, but then we can adjust to technology trends and educational priorities. Launch isn't for 5 more years, and that's a long time in technology lifetimes, and even in educational priorities when administrations are changing. So we have to make sure that we have a baseline system that's functional and strong, and then we can adjust on top of that. And then the final thing is to provide evaluation for the program. So evidence-based evaluation that we then make public so that we can start to open up conversations with SKA and 30-meter telescopes and things like that about the successes and things we've learned through LSST EPO. Now, I'm going to go through this talk and show you some wireframe web designs that we've been working on building and focus on a couple aspects of our programming, the EPO Portal and citizen science. We have spent the last almost a year, so before my time, working with user experience design contractors. And some of you on this call have even been interviewed, but they've gone around to people representing our different audiences and asked what they want, what they need, what they want to engage with. And then we've continued testing with these audiences through our wireframe designs to understand what their accessibility is and engagement level and what they need and what works for them. So it's not just we're creating things blindly and here they are for you to use, but really engaging with different audiences to understand their needs. So I'll be presenting some of that to you. The EPO portal is the main connection point for people to come in. And so the first level of engagement with the data will be through a sky viewer. So you've seen these kinds of things before. SDSS has one. You can kind of zoom around. But that's just kind of first level. From there, we can go a lot deeper. We can allow people access to the data through science notebooks, which is also the basis for what our educational program offers. And then deeper than that, we've got an API available for anybody to get in. So when you hear Mario's talk later about the DM, you'll hear something similar. They have the science platform, which starts out with a portal for entry level, and then you can get a little more complicated with the notebooks, and then you can go deeper with the API. And so we're sort of borrowing some of that structure because I like that we need an entry level point for people who haven't had much experience with this. And then I'll get into citizen science. So as a quick visual, here is one possibility for design for, on the left is the desktop, on the center is a large version of the desktop, and on the right is the mobile version. One critical aspect of EPO to consider is that the majority of our users are going to be accessing the site through their mobile device or a tablet. It's not going to be them sitting at a laptop or them sitting in front of a desktop and viewing it, because that to them is work. And this is supposed to be fun. It's a hobby. It's something that they enjoy. And so their experience is not going to be a desktop interaction for the most part. So we have to keep that in mind in our functionality and in our design. Here along the top, you can see some of the navigation. We've got the page that's shown here is under discoveries. And so in discoveries, we highlight the different main areas of science for LSST. We have a technology tab, which is talking about the camera and the system and some of the computing, and that highlights engineers working on the project. And then there's join the research, and that area will highlight the citizen science projects that are active using LSST data. So along the very top, you have news, which will probably highlight some of the alert stream events that are happening, some of the news within the team, and science results that are coming through the collaborations through the different universities around the world and researchers using LSST data. We'll have the Sky server, we have the education hub, we have data access, and then we have a multimedia gallery. The multimedia gallery is not something I'll focus on today, but that'll be videos and images, things that can be incorporated into planetarium shows, and also videos, interviews with scientists, visualizations of different kinds of data. And then maybe we'll have this option for people to log into the system so it can remember them, they can save collections, they can go through and save notebooks and things like that. A little bit more detail about the EPO portal. It needs to be mobile friendly. That's definitely a requirement. This is the centralized place, the online connection to all of the public interfaces. And the decision has been made to power it with a cloud-based EPO data center, so EDC is what we call that, which will allow for a scalable on-demand computing, which is necessary for EPO. One of the major differences between the scientific community accessing the science platform and EPO is that we can't really predict what our traffic is going to be. It's going to scale based on, I don't know, maybe Neil deGrasse Tyson's going to tweet something about it, or the BBC Sky at Night decides to highlight one of our citizen science projects. So any of these things could cause a huge flux of traffic that comes to our site, and we have to be able to respond to that. And then the final thing on this slide is evaluation. We will be proactively testing the EPO portal with diverse audiences, specifically those traditionally underrepresented in STEM, just to ensure that our deliverables remain relevant and accessible and engaging to these audiences over time. And so to do this, we will be working with community partners, with LSST researchers, minority serving institutions, museums, libraries, and even recruiting using recruiters to find people to help evaluate our engagement and usage level with these audiences. Here is a wireframe version of kind of a landing page. So what's new? You can see some ideas for alert stream, curated events and counters and things like that at the top. Then moving down, we've got kind of a description of LSST and some science highlights and maybe highlights of people working on the project. And then on the right, you see a mobile version, a much simpler, easier design for the mobile platform. Then the Sky Viewer. So this is I chose to show you a mobile version of the Sky Viewer, which is definitely unique among the Sky Viewers that are out there. There are a lot of apps where they kind of show you what constellations are in which direction. But this one will be powered with the annual data releases. You'll be able to toggle on and off, and on the right you can kind of see some curated objects that we will point out. They can be things from the alert stream, they can be listicles that show you the largest and the brightest and the biggest and all of those kinds of things that people seem to really cling on to as a point of entry. And from there, we can, here's pretty much what I've just said, but I'll highlight that we will be connecting all of these bits of content that we're curating to other parts of the portal, to Science Notebooks, to the Citizen Science Project. So we will carefully add metadata to all of the things that we're putting on the portal so that if somebody happens to zoom through the Sky Viewer, open up an object page for a galaxy or a star or something that we highlight, we know what they're looking at. And so we can suggest, hey, do you want to look at another collection of galaxies or maybe do some analysis on these? And then we can open up a science notebook, send them there, inside of which are different modules that they can use to act on the data or investigate different projects, or to citizen science projects that focus on some of the objects that they've been just perusing through the Sky Viewer. So I think that's really critical in being able to link everything that we're developing to other things so that people have a place to go. It's not just, okay, now what? They actually have some options for things that they can do. So here's another wireframe. This is the data access page for the public. It just sort of explains what big data is, gives you an introduction to a science notebook, what the LSST science notebooks are, and then invites you to create your own science notebook or look at some tutorials or even see what other people in the community have produced before. So the exciting thing for me about the science notebooks is that this is really a pathway from less technical to more sophisticated tools based on whatever the user wants to do. I mean, maybe they really do only want to zoom around kind of images, but maybe some people want to actually open images and look at them. This is a way to get into that, to actually training the next generation of scientists, or maybe some students who aren't getting things at school that they want to get, or anybody who wants to go, amateur astronomers, somebody who wants to go to that next level. We will be using the Jupyter suite with Python, and this allows us to work very closely with DM because they will be building a lot of backend modules, basic photometry, things like that we can adapt for our specific users. Now the key is we can't just use what DM is producing for the science community because it's not appropriate for our users. We have a different user expectation, we have different loads, as I mentioned, and the complexity of what they actually want to do differs. We need a different user interface. I'll say preemptively that this is also the Science Notebook we'll be using for our Education Hub, which I'll talk about next. But in order for an educator to adopt these things for their classroom, it has to be intuitive, it has to be simple, it has to be understandable from the face of it. The scientific, I'm sure the DM is going to produce something excellent, but the difference is that the scientific community will put in the effort to make it work. They want this to happen. They've got vested interest. For the public, this is fun. This is just exploration. And so we need to make it as intuitive and easy, as simple as possible. And then ultimately, LSST researchers can deploy these notebooks for their own education and outreach efforts. They can take them into classrooms. They can work with us directly to get connected to classrooms in their region and work with professional development of educators. And ultimately, collaborate with us to develop notebooks that we can then use. So here's a continuation of that web page I showed before, showing some basic designs of some of the interactive modules that might be included in some of the notebooks. And we will build kind of Python-based modules that are the basis of lots of different exercises that they can go off and do based on what they're interested in. The current state of these things is that we do have a working notebook, and it's using the LSST stack. And so we're able to start really developing these things and interacting and seeing what it is that people are actually wanting and using. And we can now move into the education section, which are a little bit more curated and have specific goals for the outcomes of what educators want out of these science notebooks. So the Educator Hub, this is where we will list, provide the web-based notebooks, and a community with the teachers to be able to kind of talk to each other and show examples of what their classrooms have been doing. We'll offer professional development focused on the content of these activities and also the tools that are available. Oh, excuse me. Let me see. The portal in the Education Hub, I think it's exciting to use notebooks for educators because they have the ability to modify the activities. We'll have kind of a workbook that's the educator workbook that gives them some background information, and then the corresponding student workbook so that they can see what the students are going to be doing. But they can modify that text based on what they've already introduced to the class. They can offer unique data samples to the students, combine the results of different students. In real time, the students can discuss why their samples show different results. They can compare class results to other classrooms in the school, in the region, in the world. And I think it's also appealing that the teachers aren't going to have to download software and maintain that software. They're not going to have to just use the data set that they've been holding on to for the last 10 or 15 years. They can actually update that because we're querying the EDC, the EPO data center, all the time to give them their unique data set. The modules and activities we'll be creating are tiered. So there's a first level, pretty teacher-driven activity, and then they can go farther so that it becomes more and more student-driven. They can do after-school activities, answering their own questions, and then the basis of these will be rooted in the next generation science standards in the US and also the goals of the CONACYT program in Chile. So we're grounding them there and then going off in the direction of the LSST science goals. I think I've mentioned the rest of that. Here's another just scroll down view of some of the activities that might be available that the teacher might see. Here are some other designs for some of the other web pages that will be part of the portal. So dark matter, highlighting videos. I don't think that take a gravitational lens selfie. Oh, I just noticed that spelling mistake is going to be developed, but wouldn't it be fun if it was? So that's kind of a maybe if we get everything else done in time, added value exercise. So the last thing I wanted to talk about with my time with you is citizen science. Our goal is to provide LSST researchers who have data rights access to LSST data to build citizen science projects for the world. And I'll go into a lot more detail with this at the all hands meeting, and I'd love to hear some feedback, particularly from people who have done this, who have been PIs or might be interested. I'm going to show you kind of a slightly detailed workflow for how this is going to work. As an LSST researcher, what are you going to do in order to start one of these projects? So at the top left there, you see the idea of the researcher with data rights wants to play with citizen science ideas. We've been working very closely with the Zooniverse, who just had their 10-year anniversary, so that's pretty exciting, to have a project builder tool. And we will work with them to develop tools that are relevant for LSST data. So what you as a researcher would do would be go into the Zooniverse project builder tool, you would submit a query for the types of data that you want from the DAC, the LSST DAC, then you retrieve 100 rows. And you have access to a password-protected website. You can pop in some of the tools that we've produced to analyze that data. Maybe you want to do shapes of galaxies or highlight bubbles in the Milky Way or whatever it is that you want to do. And you test that, and maybe you decide, oh, I actually need a different magnitude cut or something. And so you can iterate to try to build the page that works for you and your science goals. You will also be notified if another similar data set is being used for another citizen science project using LSST data. And at the point that you decide this project is good, this is where I want it, I'm getting the things that I want, you submit that to a review panel. And this is a data rights panel, because obviously taking data that is not accessible to the world, to the public, is an issue. So we're very mindful of that. And this data rights panel, their entire purpose is to verify that the project is working, and the researcher submits a description of what kind of metadata they need to do their science. And so the panel really thinks about this and verifies the level of metadata that needs to be there or not. And so the panel decides the outcome of that review. The goal is to get as many projects through this process as possible. So we want to make it very accessible and easy, but with the idea that we need to maintain the data rights understanding throughout. So the data rights panel says, yep, you're good to go. We're going to keep a certain amount of metadata and get rid of the rest of it. At this point, someone on the panel, I can imagine that'll be an EPO, maybe a DM rep, maybe somebody from citizen science, from the Zooniverse, goes through that process. So they redo the query. This time the data gets scrubbed, the metadata gets scrubbed. What is left is what is needed for the science goal. And now this is stored in the EPO data center. So this comes out of our quota of data. Some of these details we're working out with DM at the moment of the weeds of how the data is stored. But from the point of view of the researcher, now they have the opportunity with their sample to either do something private, maybe go into a classroom, maybe work within their own team or other people on their team that have data rights access, or they can test with a beta testing group of members of the public that the Zooniverse has who are willing to play with projects and give feedback on usability and understandability of it. So they can iterate with that group as much as they want. And once they're happy, they go to a launch panel, which will mostly be automated, do the full query for all the data that they need, and then this web page goes live. And now it's officially public. All of the necessary data rights protected metadata is gone. So that's the overall process. I'm hoping that lots of people can come to the LSST Citizen Science session at All Hands so I can start to understand what ideas people might have for how they want to use this, so we can start building those tools within the Zooniverse project builder. But according to their estimates, this data rights panel might even go through a few projects a week. So they're pretty enthusiastic about the usage of this, and I am too. And so I want to start opening that conversation with researchers now. And I will end my presentation just by sharing a few things of how LSST scientists can use and contribute to the EPO programming. We are certainly going to be looking for code ideas for modules that we can put in the education notebooks and science notebooks in general. So if people have things that they use or things that they'd really love to be able to use to demonstrate scientific activities or in the classroom, we'd love to hear that. When the time comes, deploying the notebooks for your own EPO efforts, I really hope that happens. And then working with us with EPO to connect with classrooms in the region or with professional development, giving us some feedback of things that you'd like to be able to use, that you'd like to be able to take to classrooms. Ultimately, in another year, maybe, we'll be asking for your networks to improve our testing and evaluation and understanding of our program, particularly with minority serving institutions and those traditionally underrepresented in STEM. We really want to focus on making our program as accessible and as engaging to people who typically haven't been engaged before. So that's a huge goal. We'd like to have you think about preparing to lead citizen science projects or your team, what kinds of citizen science project ideas there are, so we can make sure that that's compatible with the tools that we are building and making available. And then I would just like to encourage scientists to seek out any sort of diversity or equity or inclusion training that they can, so that when they go into classrooms or speak to the public, I mean, being the front face of a lot of the community to science, just to be able to communicate as skillfully and sensitively as possible with underrepresented groups. And I will leave it there and try to figure out how to stop sharing my screen and take as many questions as you can throw at me in the time we have left.
Okay, so we have a bunch of questions in the chat. The first, I don't know if this is from Mike Cooper or Michael Strauss, but can EPO start during commissioning, or do we need to wait until the survey proper starts?
That is a great question. Yeah, we will have a full commissioning period as well. So we're going to start with other sets of data. As soon as we get any programs developed, we'll be starting to test with different communities. And then once commissioning happens, we will be using commissioning data to power our programs. The Sky viewer will be powered with the annual data releases, and so my understanding is the first one comes out after 6 months. So what's going to happen in that period, we haven't quite worked out those details yet. But yes, we will be going through commissioning.
Okay. Meg, I'm going to maybe take a stab at rolling your two questions into one, because I think they're similar, which is essentially, how would you like the science collaborations to interact with EPO? And Meg provides the example of, how do they get involved and talk about their activities, or will there be fora for the science collaborations to say what they're doing? And Meg, please feel free to chime in and add into anything I may have missed in what you wanted to ask.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And Meg has reached out to me in ways that I haven't even had time to respond to. I imagine at all hands meetings is going to be one way that I'd like to open up that dialogue. I can communicate a bit more, in particular with this group and with the science leads in the particular areas that we want to try to highlight on the project webpage. We've been so focused on the design at the moment that we haven't been able to reach out too much. You've been invited to a couple workshops that we've had, and those are really kind of getting the basic understanding together. So I think, Meg, I will be reaching out a lot more. Our EPO review is in September, so we'll be working very hard to just get our design and everything through that. And then I think that's when communication's really going to open quite a bit. Hi, Beth.
Hi there. I'd like to add onto the points Amanda's made and draw everyone's attention to the fact that one of the two key focus topics for LSST 2017 is the project community interface, really quite broadly defined. And even just this morning, I brainstormed with Shelco all the different types of project community interfaces that the community and the project alike could be interested to take advantage of. And of course, we identified EPO as one of these key areas. So also know that when you look at the schedule for LSST 2017, there's a brief plenary, but then also a breakout on the project community interface. We'll just barely be able to scratch the surface, but we're really hoping to engage in meaningful conversations along these lines. And we also just talked to Michael Strauss this morning about having this be a focus of our Science Advisory Committee meeting on Monday morning of LSST 2017. And that is going to be an open meeting. You're free to attend and listen in, even if you're not a member of the SAC or somebody who's presenting. And I was actually going to reach out to Amanda to ask her to give a very brief presentation on basically a couple of the slides she showed here, highlighting potential key areas of interface between EPO and the community.
I guess my answer is yes.
Yeah, since I asked the question, I'll just
slides that you would like me, one slide that you'd like me to show. There's way too much for us to get into with the SAC, but Amanda's been just fantastic, and we haven't had EPO be as much in the limelight with the PST and the science collaborations and at the all hands meetings. But now that Ben and Amanda and their team are doing a lot of work, I'd like to advertise these opportunities that we haven't really yet wrestled with the community, especially with EPO.
All right, great. Federica asks whether there'll be a visual analytic tool similar to Google Faucets, IBM Watson's, or the CFA GlueViz.
Can you expand a little bit more on what you want that to do?
Federica?
Sorry, needed to unmute. Yeah, so these are just visual analytics tools. Basically, you can split the data by clicks of buttons and extract statistical quantities and plot them. And they work, they're designed to work on fairly high dimensional data and fairly large data set by just clever basically clever databasing. So the three that I mentioned, two are industrial, IBM and Google, and one is developed at the CFA, and it's specifically targeted. Well, it was designed originally specifically for astronomical design. So those would be, I think they would be better designed to outreach towards sort of the data science community and the people that are interested in the LSST dataset without necessarily being interested in the astronomical aspects of it. So sort of a parallel kind of outreach.
Yeah, we've definitely been thinking about that, and exactly what we would use as an example or a platform hasn't been decided. So I'll look into these examples that you've suggested. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm gonna roll the next several questions are about the Zooniverse. So I think I'll roll maybe Megs and Aprajita. I think you probably know how it's interacting. EPO is interacting with platforms like the Zooniverse. But Meg asks what the Citizen Science Project data have to count toward the EPO quota. And Brandt was asking specifically whether Zooniverse has special status with LSST and citizen science efforts.
Right. Well, I mean, the special status for Zooniverse is just that we've been working closely with them on the idea of this builder tool that they already have accessible for other places. The difference is that other places you have to upload the data that you want to use into their builder tool and then hope that the tools are applicable to that. So what we're trying to do is have an option using LSST data specifically, and then we design tools that would be useful for what researchers want to do with that data. So it's very specific to LSST, and since the Zooniverse already has the infrastructure, we've been working with them. We'll be working with the CM group to figure out exactly what the API is for how the Zooniverse accesses the data for the DAC from the DAC, and then how it gets into the EPO data center. Only the projects that go fully through to launch or to beta testing are what get pulled into the EDC as it's scheduled now. And since that goes public, since that's then world public, that's why it comes out of the EPO quota. So hopefully that answers more. I can get into some more details if people want to follow on afterwards offline.
Okay, and I think our last unique question is Federica asking what the interaction, if anything, will be with the NOAO Community Science Center.
Interesting. Well, so we share a building with them. So that conversation is getting started right now. We've kind of informally gotten some advice from them for some of our workshops. And so we have an official meeting set up for next week, actually, where we're going to be opening that dialogue a lot more.
Okay, great. I think in the interest of time, we'll move on to Mario. Certainly, if you have any additional questions, I think you should feel free to follow up with Amanda offline. Is that all right, Amanda, if I stick everybody on you?
Fantastic, and thank you very much for your time, everybody.
Thank you. We really appreciate it.